Have you ever loved God, cared deeply about your life, and still felt mentally exhausted for no clear reason? Not falling apart, not walking away from your faith, just tired in a way that makes you quietly question yourself. If that's you, I want you to hear this clearly. That hesitation you feel when you try to be consistent isn't laziness, it's memory. Your body remembers what happened the last time and you pushed too hard and ignored your limits and told yourself you'll rest later. Most people think burnout means you take a break and then you just get back to it, but that's not how it actually works. Burnout changes how effort feels in your body. It changes how discipline lands in your nervous system, and when no one explains that, you end up blaming yourself for responding normally to too much pressure. There was a time when I thought struggling mentally meant I wasn't trusting God enough. I really believed that if my faith was stronger, I wouldn't feel this tired, overwhelmed, or stuck. So instead of slowing down, I pushed. Like I prayed through the tiredness. I stayed disciplined throughout burnout. And when my body started resisting, I assumed the problem was me. Now, before we go any deeper, hey there, welcome to Self Authority. If you're new here, hi, my name is Ebony, and if you're returning, welcome back. I'm really glad you're here. Space is intentional. I help people rebuild self trust, discipline, and confidence without yelling at you or pretending like that healing is easy. This is for people who are trying to get their life together quietly, no hype, no shame, no fake resets. And if that sounds like you, go ahead and get settled because we're about to have a real conversation. What I didn't realize back then that God was never asking me to abandon myself, just to prove that I was devoted. He wasn't impressed by my tiredness. He wasn't measuring faith by how much I could endure silently. Somewhere along the way, pressure started masquerading as faith, and I didn't know the difference. I'm laughing because I was really burnt out. I was overworking. I was taking on so much responsibility, like it really became overwhelming, and I'm thinking, okay, this is what God wants me to do, but I actually was wrong. So burnout taught me something faith alone didn't teach me at first, and that was trust requires safety. Build trust spiritually or personally by constantly overriding your feelings or your capacity, basically yourself. You can't stay aligned while ignoring the signals that something needs caring. Mental health isn't separate from faith, it's part of stewardship. And that's how you care for your mind because your mind matters. I used to hear this saying say the mind is a terrible thing to waste, which it is. Now, there was a version of discipline that looks spiritually on the outside. I feel that it quietly breaks people on the inside. It glorifies endurance without discernment. It praises consistency without gentleness. I also believe that it teaches people to override their feelings in the name of obedience. And eventually, that version of discipline collapsed because it was never sustainable. It was never something that you could carry. Now, when I really think about how God leads, I believe deeply that it's not loud. God don't lead with loudness. It's not rushed. It is steady, patient, intentional. Growth isn't forced. And the moments of rest, retreat, or recalibration were never failures. They were necessary. They're necessary for the healing. A lot of mental health struggles show up when alignment is off. Not because you did something wrong, but because you stayed in that pattern for too long. And sometimes anxiety isn't rebellion and resistance isn't laziness. Sometimes it's discernment trying to get your attention, and most times people miss the calling. I've noticed the people who struggle the most mentally are often the ones who care the most. The strong one, the responsible one, the faithful one, ones who learned that early on being strong meant You have to be available, reliable. You have to sacrifice your feelings, your emotions. Over time, that turns into self abandonment, and no one teaches you how to stop it. God never intended faith to cost you your wholeness. He never asked you to function at the expense of yourself. Faith that disconnect you from your body, your emotions, your limits, eventually turns into a whole lot of pressure. Pressure is not purpose. Now, consistency after burnout has to look different. I'm telling you, if you want to be consistent, you have to go all in at a different standpoint, different mindset in order for it to be sustainable. It has to be slower, quieter, more honest. And I feel like being honest is the most important thing, because that is the way that you can understand what's really causing this. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to ask yourself, what pace lets me stay grounded? How much can I carry? Instead of asking, how do I push myself harder? And why can't I do what I used to do? I've learned that rebuilding self-trust is part of maturity. When you grow up, be an adult, but we all have to grow up and be mature. We have to keep those small promises. We have to respect our limits. And some people don't want to do it, and that's letting growth be boring sometimes, because most people don't want to be bored. They always got to be busy, keep something going. But growth is not loud. It doesn't look impressive. It is stabilizing. It's something stable, something you can handle, and stability matters more than momentum when you're in your healing process or on your healing journey. I had a big problem with this. I just couldn't rest because I feel like it was always something that needed to be done. And honestly, there's no shame in needing rest. There's no failure in slowing down, and there's no spiritual reward for suffering unnecessarily, for nothing. God doesn't require burnout as proof that you could do it, or proof of devotion. He values wisdom, alignment, and honesty. So if discipline feels heavy right now, if consistency feels fragile, mental health feels off, even though your faith is still there, this is not a sign to try harder. It's an invitation to realign, to listen, to lead yourself differently. So if this helped you feel less alone, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. If you're on your healing journey like me, or finally ready to stop starting over, make sure you subscribe and stay with me. Next topic I feel like I'm going to talk about is discipline without self-punishment. How to stay consistent without turning growth into pressure, shame, or self-betrayal. And that conversation matters more than people realize. If this resonated, let me know in the comments. I read every comment because this community matters so much to me. I just want you to know that you're not behind, you're not broken, you're learning how to move with wisdom instead of force. I really thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing yourself quietly, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.